ロロノアゾロ
Yo, what's going on everybody? It's your boy Zoro Ordinary, aka Just Ordinary. Now, first off, before we get started, I just want to say thank you guys for 100 subs. It really does mean a lot to me and I really do appreciate it. Okay, so onto the video. I know it's already 2023. I am a little late making a tier list for last year's chapters, but it's better late than never. Okay, so all the chapters on my list are subjective. So depending on who you ask, you could see a completely different list. I'm going to be using TCB scan title names for the chapters, so they might not be exactly one-to-one with the official viz, but they're mostly the same for the most part. And I'm also not going to be going into much detail on every single chapter. I'm just going to highlight the best parts or the main parts in the chapter, or else this video is going to end up being unnecessarily long and it's going to be like a 20-30 minute video. So to start it off, I want to go over my honorable mentions. There's a decent amount of them in here because if I'm gonna be honest, making this top 15 list was a lot harder than I thought because there were so many good chapters this year, and at one point this was actually supposed to be a top 10, but that was impossible, so I had to make it a top 15. So to start off the honorable mentions, we have chapter 1043, which was a chapter right before the Gear 5th reveal. It was a good chapter, don't get me wrong, but it just wasn't enough to make it into the top 15. Next up, we got chapter 1051, which was hype because Momo's adult form was revealed, which turned out pretty good in my opinion. But other than that, this chapter is pretty mid, so this is as far as it goes. Next up on the list, we got chapter 1056. This chapter is okay. We officially were introduced to the Cross Guild, but it just wasn't enough to make the top 15. Now for the second last chapter on the honorable mentions list is chapter 1037, which was a peak chapter, don't get me wrong. It was a continuation of Kaido versus Luffy, and this was where Kaido first started fighting in his drunken form. Now I did have it in my top 15, but it ended up falling out, but barely. I was really hesitant on taking it out. That's how good of a chapter it was. There was just one or two other chapters where I was just like, maybe they are a little better in my opinion. And that's what ended up happening, and I swapped them out. And for the final chapter in my honorable mentions, I have chapter 1071, the most recent One Piece chapter. Technically, it did come out in 2022, but it was set to come out in 2023, which I think is this week as of this video that this chapter is going to be coming out. But you know how OP scans and TCB scans do it, they had to release it earlier, so that's why I'm saying it was released in 2022 technically, but it was supposed to come out 2023. Now what you're all here for, my top 15. At number 15, we got chapter 1036. Bushido is the way of death. This chapter really wasn't that good. I'm not gonna lie to you. This barely made the list, but it had one of the most iconic Zoro panels in post time skip in my opinion. And that is Zoro, Roronoa Zoro, asserting himself as the king of hell. Very hype moment, especially for us Zoro fans and even One Piece fans as a whole. Next up at number 14, I have chapter 1069. We owe all there is to desire. I have this chapter on here because after 1069 chapters, we finally found out about the basic concept of devil fruits, which was practically 25 years in the making. And on top of that, we had Rob Lucci's awakening, which was really good. I'm not gonna lie, his awakening form, amazing design by Oda. At number 13, I got chapter 1059, the Captain Kobe incident. So this chapter was actually crazy. We got Blackbeard hype, we got Rayleigh hype, we got Boa hype, but we also learned what the SSG are. This chapter definitely deserved the spot on this list. Now at number 12, chapter 1054, Flame Emperor. Not only did Shanks announce that he was going after the One Piece, which got the One Piece community going crazy, but we also learned what Sabo had done in Marie Joie after years of speculating what had happened. And on top of that, we got to see Green Bull fight for the first time. Now at number 11, I have chapter 1064, the Eggheads Research Stratum. This chapter was hyped for one thing and one thing only, and that was a continuation of the fight between Blackbeard and Law. And it turned out that Law's crew wasn't as useless as we thought they were. Except my boy Beppo, bro, he's still useless. He still hasn't done nothing. All this hype for Sulong form and he still hasn't used it. Like, come on, Oda. All we want is a little bit of Sulong form Beppo and I swear our lives are complete. And on top of that, we had Aokiji and Van Augur appear in the cover page, confirming that they were the ones that had stolen pudding from Whole Cake Island. Okay, we're already in the top 10, so at number 10, starting it off, we got chapter 1053, the New Emperors. Now this right here was a jam-packed chapter. We got the reveal of the 4 emperors, which had the shocking reveal of Buggy being an emperor. We also got the bounty for Luffy, Kid, and Law, which was also pretty shocking. So at number 9, this one might seem to be a surprise to some people, but I have chapter 1055, The New Era. You know, other than Shanks just casually shooting out Conqueror's Haki wherever he wants, we also got the reveal of Pluton in Wano, and that there was actually an old city of Wano that is now submerged in water, which alone for me at least put it in my top 10 favorite chapters just because of the sheer importance this is going to have for the future of the series. At number 8, I have chapter 1048 called 20 Years. So I'm gonna be honest, I think this chapter was pretty mid, and there's only one reason why this chapter is on this list and this high up on this list is because it had my favorite form of Kaido's, and that was his flaming drum dragon form when he enlarged himself by surrounding himself in magma. And not only that, we got a pretty cool clash between him and Gear 5 Luffy in that form, and I can see why some people might not put this chapter this high, because other than that, not much really happened in the chapter. Now moving on to number 7, I have chapter 1047, Skies Above the Capital. This chapter was fire because we saw Luffy throw a lightning bolt at Kaido, and he made a fist practically the size of Onigashima. But other than that, that's pretty much all that happened in the chapter. And yo, I'm not gonna lie, the more I go down this list, the more I realize I sort of have a bias towards Gear 5th Luffy. Like I noticed, like the chapters could literally have nothing in it, but as long as Kaido and Luffy clashed a couple times, I'm happy. Now at number 6, I have chapter 1049, The World You Wish For. And I only have this chapter, just like I said, how I'm kind of biased towards Kaido and Luffy. I only have this chapter on here because this was a chapter where Kaido was slammed into the ground and finally defeated after pretty much an entire saga's worth of build-up for Kaido's defeat. And this chapter had the nastiest backstory in the history of One Piece, and that was Kaido's. So bad. But anyways, for the sake of Luffy and Momo's accomplishments in this chapter, I'ma look over it. So now we're officially in the top 5, and these chapters were just a cut above the rest. To start it off, at number 5, we have chapter 1039, The Main Attraction. And man oh man, I could say a lot about this chapter. This chapter was really hype, especially for Kid and Law. They were able to showcase their awakening abilities really well in this chapter. From Puncture Willy to Kid's damned punk, this chapter was almost a solid 10 out of 10. Without this chapter, no lie, Kid's performance in Wano would have been a fat 0 across the board. So thank you Oda for saving Kid's reputation. Now at number 4, this might seem as a shocker because I feel like some people are gonna have this chapter in their top 2, and this was chapter 1045, Next Level. Here seeing Luffy go into giant form and use Kaido as jump rope has to be one of the best Luffy moments in One Piece for me. This chapter genuinely made me laugh. Seeing Kaido's reaction to what the hell was going on, and seeing all the Straw Hats and everybody down below all confused and their eyes coming out of their heads, this was a top tier chapter. Easily a fat 10 out of 10. Now at number 3, this one might be a controversial one, but I'm putting chapter 1042, Winners Don't Need Rationalizations. Because not only was Luffy going all out in his Gear 4th forms, but we got to see more of Kaido's drunken phase and got the confirmations of Kaido having future sight, and at the very end of the chapter, we got to see the tragic loss of Luffy against Kaido for the final time. And even though I do really enjoy watching Luffy in Gear 5th, I also really enjoy watching Luffy fight in Gear 4th. And if I can remember correctly, I think for the first time we saw Luffy switch between his Gear 4th forms in the middle of a fight. So he went from Snake Man to Bound Man in one action without actually having to go out of Gear 4th first and then go back into it. Next, at number 2, this one was a really hot contender for the top spot, and that is chapter 1058, New Emperor. If Gear 5th wasn't revealed this year, this chapter would have easily taken the number 1 spot. We got to see all of the Straw Hats' new bounties, which was surprising, but still really good. And what usually would be the highlight of the chapter wasn't actually the highlight of the chapter. And that goes to the Cross Guild and Mihawk hype that we got in this chapter. First of all, the bounty that Buggy had, nobody expected that. Mihawk's bounty was crazy. Almost 3.6 billion berries with no crew, literally just for being the strongest swordsman. That's too much hype for Mihawk. And Crocodile almost having a 2 billion berry bounty. Like, I don't think some people realize how much that really is. That's above pretty much most first commanders. And as for someone who indulges himself in the Mihawk agendas, this was a top tier chapter. Also finding out that Mihawk's nickname was Marine Hunter made the rivalry between Zoro and Mihawk that much better. And finally at number 1, I gave a hint to it, and I think it's the most obvious, and it's for the most part I think most people's number 1 spot too. And that is chapter 1044, The warrior of liberation. I think Luffy's awakening far exceeded most people's expectations by not only finding out that the entire time Luffy had a mythical Zoan modeled Nika, but the abilities that came with that power. It's crazy to think that throughout 1,044 chapters, we had all thought that Luffy had the Gamu Gamu no Mi the entire time. I gotta say, Oda's ability to surprise his readers is astounding and unparalleled, but because of that, thank you Oda for making such an amazing story and an amazing year. We really do appreciate it. And that's all there is from me today. Thank you again for 100 subs. Make sure to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comment section what your top 15 chapters of the year is, and peace out.